The night was cold, and the streets of the alien marketplace were nearly empty. Broken lanterns flickered in the wind, casting weak light over cracked stone paths. A mother walked slowly, her steps heavy, her thin arms wrapped around a small child. Her daughter's face was pale, her eyes tired, her stomach empty. They had not eaten for 2 days. The mother's name was Lyra, and her child's name was Maya. Lyra was not old, she was still young, but hunger and sorrow had carved deep lines on her face. She used to be proud once, but now pride meant nothing. Only her daughter mattered. She whispered to the little girl in her arms, "Stay awake, my love, I'll find something for you, I promise." But she knew promises meant little when one had no food to give. Around her, shopkeepers were closing their stalls. The smell of cooked meat drifted from one corner, but she had no credits to pay. Maya's small hands clutched her tightly, her lips moving weakly. "Mom, food." Lyra's heart broke at the sound. She pressed her cheek against her daughter's forehead. "I'll do anything," she thought, "even if it means losing myself." She stopped near a fire pit where a few merchants sat drinking. Their laughter was harsh, their eyes sharp as knives. Lyra pulled her daughter close, then slowly stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "Just one night with me. Feed my daughter. That is all I ask." The men laughed cruelly. One spat on the ground. A starving alien, mother offering herself for scraps? How pathetic. Another waved his hand. "Go away, you're not worth a single coin." Shame burned her cheeks, but she stood firm. For her child, she would endure humiliation. Then, from the shadows, a different voice spoke. "Wait." She turned. A man stood there, a human. His clothes were travel-worn, his face covered with dust from the road. But his eyes were steady and clear, watching her not with cruelty, but with something else. Something she could not name. He stepped closer. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. Her lips shook. "I said, 1 night with me, just feed my daughter. She's starving. Please." The human's jaw tightened. He looked at the small girl clinging to her mother's chest, her fragile body trembling from hunger. He knelt slightly, lowering himself to see the child's face. Maya opened her tired eyes, too weak to even fear a stranger. She whispered, "Hungry," before closing them again. The human exhaled slowly. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of bread still wrapped in cloth. He held it out. "Take this." Lyra stared at him in disbelief. "But I have nothing to give you." "I didn't ask for anything," the man said. His voice was calm, but there was strength in it. She hesitated. All her life she had learned that kindness was a trick, that nothing came without a price. But her daughter stirred again, weakly reaching out. Lyra snatched the bread and quickly broke it into small pieces, pressing them into Maya's hands. The child ate slowly, crumbs falling across her lap. For the first time in days, color returned to her cheeks. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She dropped to her knees in front of the human. Why are you helping me?" The human's gaze softened, but he did not answer at once. He looked at the merchants nearby who sneered at the sight, then back at the mother and child. Finally, he said, "Because no one else will." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Lyra could not understand. Why would a stranger, worse a human, care for her or her daughter? She had offered herself and he had refused. She had expected mockery, or worse. Instead, he had given them life. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. "If you don't want me, then why? What do you want?" The man shook his head. "Nothing. You should not have to beg for food. No mother should." The words struck her harder than any blow. She had expected cruelty, but kindness felt sharper, more dangerous. Because kindness could give her hope. And hope was something she had lost, long ago. The merchants laughed behind them, calling the human a fool. "She's worthless, throw them back into the gutter." But the human ignored them. He looked at Lyra again, and this time his voice carried weight. "Come with me. You and your child, I'll take you somewhere safe." Her breath caught. Safe? The word felt like a dream, but dreams often turn to dust. She clutched Maya tightly, torn between fear and desperation. "Why?" she whispered. He looked straight at her. "Because no one deserves to freeze in the dark." Lyra trembled. The night air bit into her skin, the laughter of the cruel men echoing around her. She wanted to run, to refuse, to protect her daughter from another disappointment. But the warmth of bread in her child's hands reminded her, this man had already given more than anyone else. Slowly, uncertainly, she nodded. And with that single choice, their lives began to change. The streets were quiet as the human led them away from the fire pit. Lyra walked behind him, clutching her daughter close. Maya had fallen asleep with crumbs still on her lips, her tiny chest rising and falling in weak rhythm. Every step Lyra took felt heavy. Her mind kept racing. Why is he helping? What does he really want? She had offered herself in desperation, but the man had not touched her, not even once. He had only given food. That was something she had not seen in years, help without a price. But her heart was wary. She had been fooled before. The human stopped near the edge of the market, where broken stalls leaned against each other. He looked back at her. "You should eat too," he said. Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, my daughter first." The man sighed softly and reached into his pack again. He pulled out a dried piece of fruit and held it toward her. "Take it. You need strength if you want to carry her." Her hand shook as she reached out. She hadn't eaten in 2 days either. Slowly, she placed the fruit in her mouth. The taste was sweet, almost painful after so much hunger. Tears filled her eyes, but she looked away, ashamed that he had seen her weakness. For a while, they walked in silence, only the crunch of gravel under their feet breaking the stillness. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me. Why are you doing this?" The man glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "My name is Jonas," he said simply. "And I don't need to know you to see your suffering." His words made her chest tighten. She lowered her gaze, unable to reply. They passed a group of aliens near a well. Their eyes followed her, cold and mocking. One of them snickered loudly. "Look at that. The desperate woman found herself a human. How low she's fallen." Another spat on the ground. "He'll toss her aside by morning. Just watch." Lyra flinched at the words. Shame burned her, just like before. She expected Jonas to push her away after hearing such talk. Instead, he turned his head toward them and stared. His gaze was sharp, steady, and unafraid. The group fell silent under, his eyes muttering curses as they backed off. Lyra blinked in surprise. No one had ever defended her. No one had ever silenced the voices of scorn. When they finally reached a quiet street at the edge of the settlement, Jonas slowed. He pointed toward a narrow path that led into the hills. "My place is not far. It's small but warm. You can rest there." Her heart thudded with fear. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to not trust a stranger. But her daughter stirred in her arms, mumbling in her sleep. The child's breath was warmer now, her face no longer as pale. She had no choice. She had nowhere else to go. "Just for tonight," Lyra whispered. "I'll leave in the morning." Jonas didn't argue. He only nodded. "Tonight is enough." The path wound between jagged rocks and wild shrubs. The night grew colder, but the stars shone brighter above. Lyra looked at the human's back as he walked ahead. His steps were steady, his shoulders broad, his presence strangely calm. Why does he care? She wondered. Humans are supposed to be selfish, dangerous. Yet he... Her thoughts were broken when Jonas spoke without turning his head. "You must have come from far. Where is your home?" She hesitated, then answered quietly, "Gone. Burned. Raiders destroyed it. They killed my husband. I ran with Maya." Jonas didn't reply right away. His silence was heavy, but it was not cruel. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry." 2 words. Simple. But they carried more weight than any sympathy she had ever heard. Most people mocked survivors. Few offered sorrow. Lyra lowered her head, clutching her daughter tighter. After a long walk, they reached a small wooden house built against the hillside. A faint glow came from the windows. Jonas pushed the door open, letting warm air escape into the night. Inside, a small fire burned in the hearth. The room was simple, just a table, a chair, a bed, and some shelves with jars of dried food. To Lyra, it looked like a palace. Jonas stepped aside. "Come in." Her legs trembled as she crossed the threshold. She had not been in a home since her own was destroyed. Carefully, she placed Maya on the bed. The little girl sighed in her sleep, sinking into the blanket. For the first time in months, her child was not lying on cold stone. Lyra stood by the bedside, her hands shaking. She turned to Jonas, her voice raw. "What do you want from me?" Jonas looked at her, his face serious. He walked closer, then placed another blanket gently over the child. "Nothing," he said. Her breath caught. "That's not possible. No one gives without taking." He met her eyes. "Maybe it's time someone did." She stared at him, speechless. Outside, the cold wind howled through the hills, but inside the little home there was warmth. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a spark of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. But in the back of her mind, a shadow of doubt lingered. Could kindness truly exist in such a cruel world? Or was this only the beginning of another test she would not survive? The fire crackled softly, as if keeping the answer hidden for tomorrow. Morning. Sunlight filtered through the cracks of the wooden shutters. The little room glowed softly, filled with the smell of burning wood from the hearth. For the first time in many nights, Lyra woke not on cold stone, but under a roof. She blinked, confused at first. The last thing she remembered was laying her daughter on the human's bed, afraid it was only a cruel dream. But now Maya was still there, sleeping peacefully, her lips no longer pale, her small hands curled against the blanket. A soft sound came from the table. Jonas, the human, was sitting there, cutting a loaf of bread into pieces. He looked up when he saw her awake. "Good morning," he said simply. Lyra sat up quickly, her back tense. Her eyes darted around the small house. Nothing looked dangerous. No chains, no locks, no sign of a trap. Still, fear gripped her chest. Why hasn't he asked for anything? Jonas noticed her unease but didn't comment. He placed a piece of bread on a small plate, then added a slice of dried fruit. He carried it over and set it near her. "Eat. You need strength." Her hands shook as she reached for it. Her mind screamed to refuse, to demand the price first. But hunger silenced all doubt. She ate slowly, tasting warmth and sweetness with every bite. Maya stirred at the smell. The little girl opened her eyes, blinking up at the ceiling. Then she smiled weakly. "Mom? Warm?" Lyra pressed her hand over her daughter's forehead, tears threatening to fall. "Yes, my love, warm." Jonas crouched beside the bed, meeting the child's gaze. "You can have more later, but first, rest." Maya nodded sleepily before closing her eyes again. Lyra stared at him. Suspicion and confusion warred inside her. At last she whispered, "Why are you doing this? You could have left us in the street. You could have taken what I offered, but you didn't. Why?" Jonas sat back, his expression calm but serious. "Because I've seen what happens when no one helps. I lost people once. I couldn't save them. But I can save you." The words hit her heart like a heavy stone. For a long moment she couldn't reply. Her life had been filled with cruel bargains, broken promises, and cold refusals. And yet here was a man who spoke of saving, not taking. Still, she couldn't believe it fully. She clutched her daughter tighter and said, "We can't stay. If others find out, they'll hate you too." Jonas shrugged. "Let them. I don't live for their approval." His certainty unsettled her. He spoke as if kindness was normal, as if sheltering strangers was nothing. She didn't know if it was bravery or foolishness. The day passed quietly. Jonas chopped firewood outside while Lyra sat by the hearth, watching over her daughter. She tried to keep her hands busy, mending her torn dress with a bit of thread she found, cleaning the floor with scraps of cloth. She could not sit idle while receiving his food. Jonas noticed when he came back in. "You don't have to do that," he said. Her eyes lowered. "I can't give you anything else. At least let me clean." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If it makes you feel better, fine, but you don't owe me." His words were strange, almost unbelievable. Everyone she had met since the war began had demanded payment for every crumb, every drop of water, and yet this man claimed she owed him nothing. That evening, Jonas cooked a simple stew over the fire. The smell filled the house, rich and warm. He handed her a wooden bowl. Lyra took it carefully, staring at the steam rising. Her daughter woke and ate slowly beside her, smiling with each spoonful. The warmth of the food spread through their bodies, and for the first time in months, they felt alive again. Maya leaned against Jonas's side after finishing, her small eyes closing. "Safe," she whispered. Jonas froze for a moment, then gently lifted her and laid her back in the bed. Lyra's chest tightened at her daughter's words. Safe. Could this home, this man, really mean safety? As the fire burned low, Lyra found her courage to ask again. "What will happen tomorrow? Will you send us away?" Jonas looked at her firmly. "Not unless you want to leave." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She had expected rejection, a limit to his charity. Instead, his answer opened a door she didn't know existed. She turned her face away, whispering softly to herself, "Why human? Why show me this warmth when the world has only been cold?" He didn't reply. Instead, he set another log on, the fire, its flames rising, filling the room with golden light. Lyra sat in silence, her daughter breathing steadily in sleep, her own heart torn between fear and hope. For the first time in years, she wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, a future might still exist. But outside, in the darkness beyond the hills, shadows moved. Neighbors had seen them enter the human's house. Whispers had begun to spread, and though Lyra felt warmth in that little home, danger was already on its way. The fire crackled softly as night settled again over the little house. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but inside, warmth lingered. Lyra sat by the hearth, her daughter asleep under the blanket, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. Jonas sat at the table, sharpening a knife. The sound of stone against metal echoed in the room. His movements were steady, practiced, but his face was distant, as if his mind was far away. Lyra watched him for a long time before speaking. "Do you always live alone?" she asked quietly. Jonas paused, then nodded. "Yes, for many years." She hesitated. "Why?" His eyes lifted to hers. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then he placed the knife down and leaned back in his chair. "Because everyone I cared about is gone." The words chilled her more than the cold outside. Jonas's gaze shifted to the fire, its flames reflecting in his eyes. "The war took them. My wife, my son. They were caught in a raid. I couldn't reach them in time." Lyra's breath caught. Pain tightened her chest. She whispered, "I'm sorry." He shook his head slowly. "Don't be. Sorry doesn't change the past." For the first time, she saw more than just kindness in his eyes. She saw deep scars, invisible wounds carved into his soul. He carried grief, like she carried hunger. Her voice trembled. Then why help us? Wouldn't it hurt you more? To take in others? Jonas looked at her steadily. Because I couldn't save my family. But maybe I can save yours. Her hands clutched at her dress. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a burden, not as worthless, but as someone worth saving. Still, she feared opening her heart. She turned her face away, whispering, "My story is no better." Jonas's voice was calm. "Tell me." Lyra's body stiffened. Memories clawed at her mind. Memories of fire, blood, and betrayal. She wanted to stay silent. But in the quiet of the little home, with her daughter safe in bed, her lips began to move. My people. We lived in a small colony. My husband worked as a trader. We weren't rich, but we had enough. Then raiders came. They burned everything. My husband tried to fight. They killed him before my eyes. Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. I ran with Maya. We had nothing. No food, no friends. At every settlement, people spat on us. Some wanted me to work in houses of shame. Others laughed when I begged for food. I sold myself once, just once, for bread. I swore, never again, but yesterday I broke that promise. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands. I was ready to give myself away like I was nothing, all for one meal for my daughter. That's who I am now, broken, worthless. Jonas stood quietly, then walked over. He crouched before her, his presence strong and steady. He didn't touch her, but his voice carried weight. You're not worthless. You're a mother who refused to let her child die. That is strength. Her hands lowered, her eyes wide. Strength? No. I begged. I offered shame. Strength, Jonas repeated firmly. You survived. You kept her alive. That is more than most could do. His words sank deep into her heart. She wanted to believe him, but the voices of the cruel merchants, the mocking neighbors, echoed in her mind. Before she could reply, a knock thundered against the door. Lyra gasped, pulling Maya closer. Jonas's face hardened. He moved to the door and opened it a crack. Outside stood two men from the settlement. Their eyes glared with suspicion. We saw you bring her here, one sneered. A worthless alien and her brat. You think you're saving her? She's trouble. Throw them out before they bring shame to you too. The other added, humans don't belong with their kind. If you keep her, the village will turn against you. Lyra's blood turned cold. Her worst fear had come true. Jonas's voice was low but sharp. She's under my roof, my choice, leave. The men scoffed. You'll regret this. They turned and vanished into the darkness. Jonas closed the door slowly, his jaw tight. He turned back to Lyra, who trembled in fear. They'll come again, she whispered. They'll hate you because of me. Jonas stepped closer. His words were steady, almost like iron. Let them hate. I won't throw you out. Her lips parted, but no words came. He looked so certain, so unshaken. Yet she knew the danger was real. That night, long after the fire dimmed, Lyra lay awake beside her daughter. She listened to Jonas's quiet movements as he kept watch near the door, ready for trouble. Her heart ached with confusion. How could a man who had lost everything still choose to protect others? And though fear still lived inside her, a small part of her wondered if this human's scars were what made him strong enough to shelter them. For the first time, she dared to dream of a tomorrow where they might not be alone. But in the darkness, outside whispers grew louder. The settlement would not forget. The next morning came with heavy silence. The sun rose, but its warmth could not reach Lyra's heart. She sat at the small table, holding her daughter close. Maya was smiling faintly, her cheeks less pale now, but Lyra's mind was restless. She remembered the men at the door last night. Their threat still echoed in her ears. They will come again, they won't stop. Jonas walked in from outside, his arms full of firewood. He set it near the hearth, dusting his hands. His face was calm, but she noticed his eyes were sharp, as if he was expecting something. "They'll talk," Lyra whispered. "The whole village will know." Jonas nodded slowly. "I know." Her throat tightened. "Then, maybe we should leave. Maya and I will go far away. You don't need this trouble." Jonas looked at her for a long time. His voice was steady. When he replied, "If you leave, where will you go? More hunger, more cruelty. You'll die out there. No, you stay here. Let them talk." Lyra's chest ached. She wanted to argue to protect him from her curse, but his certainty silenced her. By afternoon, the whispers turned into open stares. When Jonas went into the settlement for supplies, people pulled away. Merchants frowned, some refusing to sell, to him. He ignored them, his broad shoulders steady, his voice calm as he bought what he needed. But behind him, words hissed like venom. "The human shelters her. He's protecting trash. He'll regret it." Jonas didn't respond. He only carried the food back home. Lyra watched from the window as he returned. She saw the way people glared at his back, the way a few even spat on the ground after he passed. Fear tightened her stomach. "It's happening. I'm destroying him." That night, as Maya slept, she spoke again. "You should throw us out. They won't forgive you for keeping us." Jonas was sitting near the fire, sharpening his knife again. He looked up, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't need their forgiveness. I don't live by their rules. But, no." He cut her off gently. "I told you. You're safe here, that doesn't change." Her lips trembled. She had no answer. 2 days later, the threat arrived. It was evening, and the fire was burning low. Lyra was washing a small bowl in a wooden basin when she heard footsteps outside. Many footsteps. Her heart froze. Jonas stood, his knife sliding back into its sheath. He moved to the door, his posture strong, unafraid. The pounding came. A heavy fist struck the wood. "Jonas, open up!" a rough voice shouted. Maya stirred in her sleep. Lyra rushed to hold her close, whispering softly, "Shh, stay quiet, my love." Jonas opened the door. A group of villagers stood outside. 5 men and 2 women, their faces twisted with anger. Torches burned in their hands, casting harsh light across the hillside. One of them pointed at Lyra through the doorway. "She doesn't belong here. Throw her out, human. She'll bring shame and ruin to us all," another added. "If you protect her, then you turn against us. Choose wisely." Lyra clutched Maya tighter. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Please, don't fight them. I'll go. Just let us leave." But Jonas didn't step aside. His figure blocked the doorway, his presence like a wall. His voice cut through the shouts. "She and her daughter stay. They are under my roof. If you want them gone, you'll have to take them through me." The crowd growled, their voices rising. "She's worthless. She'll poison this place. You're a fool, human." Lyra's heart pounded. She could see their anger, the way they gripped their torches like weapons. She expected Jonas to step back, to give in. Instead, he took a step forward. His voice was low, but it carried like thunder. "Call me a fool if you want, but I won't let you harm them, not while I live." The villagers hesitated. His eyes burned with a strength that made even the boldest among them falter. For a moment, the crowd wavered. One of the men sneered. "You'll regret this. When she brings ruin, remember this night." They turned, muttering curses, their torches disappearing into the dark. Jonas closed the door slowly, the sound echoing in the silence. Lyra's knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, holding her daughter close. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why? Why would you risk everything for us?" Jonas knelt in front of her, his face calm but his voice firm. "Because you deserve to live, and your daughter deserves to grow up without fear." Her heart trembled. She had expected cruelty. She had expected abandonment. But what she found was a man who stood against his own people for her and her child. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her daughter slept soundly, safe in the warmth of blankets. But Lyra's thoughts spun endlessly. Jonas had chosen them. He had stood firm. But how long could one man fight against an entire settlement? And yet, deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Trust. The threat outside was real, but inside that little home, a fragile hope was being born. The days that followed were quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that warned of a storm. Lyra could feel it in the way neighbors watched from a distance. She could see it in the way whispers followed Jonas whenever he entered the market. Jonas never spoke of it. He continued with his work, chopping wood, fixing tools, cooking simple meals. To him, life inside the little home was steady, but Lyra knew the silence outside was dangerous. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky red, Maya played softly near the fire, humming to herself. Lyra smiled faintly, watching her daughter's joy. But the smile vanished when heavy footsteps came from outside. Many, too many. Jonas rose instantly. His hand went to the knife at his belt. His eyes narrowed, his body tense. The pounding on the door came like thunder. "Jonas, open up now!" Lyra froze, pulling Maya into her arms. The child whimpered, sensing the danger. Jonas opened the door just enough to stand in the frame. Outside, a crowd had gathered, dozens this time, not just a few. Torches blazed, in their hands and their faces twisted with anger and fear. The leader, a broad-shouldered alien with scarred skin, stepped forward. "We warned you. You shelter filth in your home, you shame us all. Tonight we end this." The crowd roared in agreement. Some carried sticks, others had stones. Lyra's heart sank. She whispered, "Jonas, please, let me go. If I leave, they'll leave you alone." Jonas shook his head firmly. "No, this ends tonight." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Lyra clutched her daughter, trembling. She pressed her ear against the wood, listening. Jonas stood tall before the mob, firelight flickering across his face. "You think she's worthless?" he called out. His voice was steady, carrying above the noise. "You think her child is poison? Then hear me. If you want them, you'll take them over my body," the leader sneered. "Why risk your life for them? She's not your kind. That girl isn't your blood." Jonas's jaw tightened. His voice cut through the air like steel. "Because kindness has no kind. Because life has value. Hers, her daughter's, yours. If you've forgotten that, then you are already dead inside." The words struck the crowd, but anger burned hotter than reason. Stones flew. One struck Jonas's shoulder, another grazed his arm. He didn't flinch. He stood firm, knife in hand. The mob surged forward. Inside, Lyra's fear turned to panic. She wanted to run to protect her daughter, but her legs wouldn't move. She could only hear the chaos outside. Shouts, curses, the clash of wood against steel. Maya buried her face in her mother's chest. "Mom, I'm scared." Lyra kissed her forehead, whispering through tears. "It's all right, my love. He's fighting for us." Outside, Jonas fought not with rage, but with control. His knife flashed in the firelight, slicing sticks from hands, forcing men back. He struck with fists and elbows, never killing, only driving them away. His voice roared above the crowd. "Is this who you are? Beating a man for protecting a child?" For a moment, the mob wavered. Doubt flickered in some faces, but the leader shouted louder, his voice filled with venom. "He's weak. He sides with trash. Burn his house." At once, two men broke away, rushing toward the walls with torches. Lyra gasped as smoke began to rise. Flames licked at the wooden frame. She cried out, "No, please, not my daughter." Jonas turned, rage flashing in his eyes for the first time. He lunged, knocking the torches from their hands, slamming one man into the dirt. The other stumbled back, fear replacing fury. The crowd hesitated. Jonas stood over them, his chest heaving, his knife gleaming in the firelight. His voice was low, but every word carried weight. "If you burn this house, You burn with it. The mob fell silent. Torches wavered in uncertain hands. One by one, they lowered them. The leader snarled, but even he stepped back, cowed by Jonas's fire. This isn't over, human. You'll pay for choosing her. The crowd slowly dispersed, vanishing into the night. Jonas stood in the doorway, his clothes torn, blood streaking his arm. His breath was heavy, but his eyes were steady. Lyra rushed to him, her daughter still in her arms. Tears streamed down her face. You faced them all. Why? Why do this for us? Jonas looked at her, his voice softer now, almost weary. Because I couldn't save my own family. I won't fail again. Her heart broke at the pain in his words. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but no words were enough. Instead, she reached out with trembling hands and pressed a cloth to his wound. He didn't pull away. As the fire outside died down, silence returned to the hillside. But in that silence, something had changed. The mob had seen his strength. Lyra had seen his resolve. And deep inside her heart, a fragile bond was growing. A bond she never thought she would feel again. Jonas had been tested by fire, and for now, he had stood unbroken. But Lyra knew the settlement would not forget. The true battle was still to come. The night after the attack was heavy with silence. Smoke still lingered in the air where torches had nearly set the little home aflame. Inside, the fire burned low, its light flickering against the wooden walls. Jonas sat by the door, a bandage wrapped around his arm. His shoulders were tired, but his eyes remained sharp as if he was still expecting another knock. Lyra sat across from him, her daughter safe in her lap. She had not slept. Her mind kept replaying the scene, Jonas standing alone against dozens, refusing to move, refusing to give her up. When dawn came, light spilled through the cracks in the shutters. For the first time in weeks, Maya woke smiling, her tiny hands reaching out to the warmth of the morning. Mom, it's bright. Lyra kissed her forehead, tears in her eyes. Yes, my love. Bright. Jonas stood, stretching his sore muscles. He opened the door and looked outside. The village was quiet. No crowd, no shouts, only the sound of the wind. But he knew the silence meant more than peace. It meant people were watching, waiting. Lyra came to stand beside him, clutching her. Daughter. Her voice was soft. They'll never accept us. Because of me, they'll never accept you. Jonas glanced at her. His answer was calm but firm. Then I don't need them. Her breath caught. But you'll lose everything. Your place. Your people. He shook his head slowly. A place means nothing without purpose, and people mean nothing without honor. I choose to stand with you. The words made her heart tremble. For years she had been nothing but a burden, a beggar, a shadow. Now someone had spoken as if she mattered, as if her daughter mattered. Later that day, a knock came again, but this time it was soft. Jonas opened the door cautiously. An old man stood there leaning on a cane. His eyes were tired but not cruel. He looked at Jonas, then at Lyra and her child. You shamed them last night, the elder said, but you also reminded us of something we forgot. Mercy. Jonas said nothing, waiting. The old man continued. Some will hate you for this, but others saw the truth, that a man willing to fight for the weak is stronger than a crowd, willing to destroy them. He stepped back, leaving a small sack of food on the ground. This is not much, but take it. Not everyone is against you. With that, he left, his cane tapping against the dirt road. Lyra stared at the sack, her lips parting in shock. They helped? Jonas closed the door gently. Sometimes it takes fire to wake sleeping hearts. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jonas sat outside sharpening his knife again. Lyra came to sit near him, Maya sleeping in her arms. For a long time, neither spoke. The quiet stretched, filled only by the sound of crickets. Finally, Lyra whispered, "All I asked for was one night. Just one night of food for my daughter. And you gave us more than I ever dreamed." Jonas looked at her, his face steady. "You don't need to bargain anymore. This is your home now." Her breath caught. The word struck deeper than any blade. She turned her gaze away, blinking back tears. Home. I thought I'd never hear that word again. "You have it now," he said simply. Maya stirred in her sleep, her small hand reaching toward Jonas even as she dreamed. Lyra watched as his rough fingers gently covered the child's hand, steady and warm. Something inside her broke. Something hard and cold that had lived in her chest since the night her husband was killed. It crumbled, replaced by something fragile, but alive. Hope. Days turned into weeks. The villagers kept their distance, though a few offered cautious nods instead of glares. The old man returned sometimes, bringing small gifts: grain, a jug of water, a tool for Jonas. The whispers had not stopped, but the storm had passed. Jonas's choice had become a shield around the little home, one no one dared to test again. Lyra no longer woke with fear each morning. Maya no longer cried from hunger. The little girl began to laugh, to play with sticks outside, to sing in her small voice. One evening, as they all sat by the fire, Maya suddenly looked up at Jonas and asked, "Are you my father now?" The question hung in the air like thunder. Lyra's eyes widened, her face pale. "Maya," she began, but Jonas lifted a hand gently to stop her. He looked at the child, his voice soft but steady. "I'm not the father you were born to, but if you want me to be, then yes, I will be." Maya smiled sleepily and leaned against him. "Then you are." Lyra's heart broke again, but this time with joy. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You don't have to." Jonas met her gaze, his voice firm. "I already chose. You asked me for one night. I give you a lifetime." Her breath caught. She covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing quietly. No words could answer that promise. That night, as the fire burned low, Lyra lay awake with her daughter asleep beside her. Jonas sat by the door, as always, keeping watch. But this time she did not see him as just a protector. She saw him as the man who had taken her despair and turned it into life. Outside, the village still whispered, but inside that small wooden house, something greater than fear lived now. A family had been chosen, not by blood, not by bargain, but by love. And for Lyra, who had once begged only for one night, that gift was worth more than the stars themselves.